To use the Roto Brush tool to isolate a foreground object, you start by adding strokes to a base frame to identify foreground and background areas. You can start on any frame in the clip, but in this exercise you'll use the first frame as the base frame. Then you'll add the strokes that identify the boy as the foreground object. Move the current time indicator across the time ruler to preview the footage, and then press the Home key to move the current time indicator back to the beginning of the time ruler. Select the Roto Brush tool in the Tools panel. You use the Roto Brush tool in the Layer panel, which you'll open now. Double-click the boy.mov layer in the Timeline panel to open the clip in the Layer panel. Choose Fit from the Magnification Ratio pop-up menu at the bottom of the Layer panel if you don't see the entire image. By default, the Roto Brush tool creates green foreground strokes. You'll start by adding strokes to the foreground, the boy. Generally, it's most efficient to start with broad strokes and then use smaller brushes to refine the border. Choose Window, Brushes to open the Brushes panel. Set up a hard, round 100 pixel brush. You may need to resize the Brushes panel to see the options. When you're drawing strokes to define the foreground object, follow the skeletal structure of the subject. Unlike traditional rotoscoping, you don't need to define a precise boundary around the object. Start with the broad strokes and work down to small regions as After Effects determines where the boundary is supposed to be. Draw a green stroke from the boy's head down toward the bottom of the clip. A magenta outline identifies the boundaries After Effects created for the foreground objects. After Effects recognized only about half of the boy because you initially sampled only a small area of the subject. You'll help After Effects find the boundary by adding some more foreground strokes. Still using a large brush, draw a green stroke from left to right across the boy's coat, including the black strip on the right. Use a smaller brush to add any neglected areas of the foreground. It can be tricky to get some areas without accidentally adding background as well. It's okay if you haven't captured every detail in the foreground. You'll use background strokes to remove any extraneous areas of the mat. Press Alt on Windows or Option on a Mac to switch to the red background stroke brush. Add red strokes to background areas you want to exclude from the mat. Switch back and forth between the foreground and background brushes to fine-tune the mat. And don't forget to deselect the area under the boy's hat, where the background shows through. In fact, one click may be all it takes to exclude that area from the mat. Don't worry about being exact about your brush strokes. Just make sure the mat is within 1 to 2 pixels of the edge of the foreground object. You'll have an opportunity to refine the mat later. However, After Effects uses the information on the base frame to adjust the mat for the rest of the span, so you want the mat to be accurate. Click the Toggle Alpha button at the bottom of the Layer panel. The selected area is white against a black background, so you can see the mat clearly. Click the Toggle Alpha Overlay button at the bottom of the Layer panel. And the foreground area appears in color, and the background has a red overlay. Click the Toggle Alpha Boundary button at the bottom of the Layer panel to see the outline around the boy again. As you use the Roto Brush tool, the alpha boundary is the best way to see how accurate your boundary is, because you can see everything in the frame. However, the alpha and alpha overlay options let you see your mat without the distraction of the background.